Our odyssey of reconstruction continues. Today, it's time to press out some benches. Good rule of thumb, whenever reconstructing something, always try to look for symmetry, especially when you have multiple of the same sort of object, like here with our benches. Fortunately, we only need to reconstruct the one. Whenever creating multiple objects that are all the same type, be sure to try and locate where that object is most symmetrically represented in your 360 image. As always, you can slide out of your modeled scene with the move function to refer to your original 360 picture, giving yourself a fresh perspective on what you're recreating. Out here, we can look at the various sides of the benches, getting a feel for the geometry of each object. We can clearly see that there's multiple depths to our frame, a top piece, and a hollow rectangular end piece that's slightly deeper underneath the seat itself. We have to consider our best approach here. Between the various tools available, there's over 20 different methods, including our old friends, contour and extrusion, which we'll be using today, swapping back to the menu to prime contour. You'll also note, in our menu, there are now GIFs towards the bottom that actively demonstrate what each tool does. You can enable and disable these GIFs with a quick click on their screen. Quick aside, remember that clicking down on the left joystick will always recenter you in your scene. Also, your version of Inverse will have additional features implemented to aid you in today's task, with additional color coding for clearer use of tools, and a camera icon on the origin point of your 360 picture. Very handy! By starting with the contour tool, we're going to create a line at the point where the bench meets the floor at a 90-degree angle. Let's lean in close, and since we're just creating a line, we simply bring the next point back to the origin and close the loop there. Now that we've drawn our line in the sand, it's time to raise it up. Literally. Using standard extrusion, we're going to want to pull on that line, and do be mindful to not select the floor, which will highlight blue when your cursor is over it, rather than the line. If we drag it up with the default extrusion tool, a panel is conjured, though one problem is that we now have to eyeball a perfect 90-degree angle from the floor. Fortunately, there's a way around this. Let's cancel our action by pressing A, and then swap to the snapping function in the extrusion's submenu. Now, when we select and pull the line, it comes out at a perfect 90-degree angle, shifting between all four 90-degree angles wherever you drag it, snapping into place. We need to keep that space between the top board and the lower supports, so we'll first create the legs. Then, narrowing our pointer for greater precision, we select off the top of our initial panel and form the underside of the legs, followed by finally creating the top board like so. Now, obviously, we can't just pull the rest of the bench up from the floor because the scene has our bench flat against the ground at an angle, but we've got a trick to overcome this. We're going to extrude from the top edge of the board and we'll draw it outwards into the 3D space. Within seconds, it unveils the true length of the top board. What we want to do now is add some volume to that, selecting the interior side of that panel we just created, expanding it to match the rest of the board. Beautiful. And next, let's draw from the corner edge of the leg section, pulling it over to match. Now we're making some serious headway, and it's time to crack open a new tool from our current menu, the offsetting tool. You can do an offset on any exterior surface. Using the front right trigger with offset is going to set an offset on the outside of the surface, but what we want to do here is an offset on the inside of the surface so that we can replicate the end of the bench. To do so, we hold down the right inner trigger, reducing the panel, eyeballing it to about the portions on the other bench from before, which we'll be using as reference, releasing the trigger to set the panel. Now, let's select delete real quick and delete the inner offset. And there you go. As for the side surface from before, we can delete that now, and the other lower surface as well. Next, we'll draw from the interior side of the end piece with extrusion, obeying the geometry we know rather than the width presented by the 360 image's surface, pulling it across to form a solid copy of the legs, then continuing with an additional extrusion of the underside, stopping right before the other end piece, wrapping things up with that final end piece as its own section. And thanks to our previous efforts, it's already hollow inside. Our bench is almost done, but first, we've got a few extra surfaces that need dealing with. Instead of deleting them one by one, we can switch to the scene editing category of the menu, swapping over to delete objects, which lets us choose and delete multiple objects at once. Now, we're going to select them as one whole object, then confirm in the menu to delete this object, and now, all the surfaces are gone, with our finished bench waiting. Almost perfect. We just need to do a little fix so that all the various parts move together in a seamless whole. To group everything, we need to swap back to select and click on each object, keeping an eye on their bounding boxes, and by the time you're watching this, there will be a green feedback when an object is selected. Once we've selected them all, we can choose Group from the Select sub-menu. And now, they're a single object that can be moved from the Move tool. With our bench complete, we can easily copy it with the scene editing tool Duplicate, just doing a quick copy-paste of our furniture by holding down the right trigger, moving the right joystick side to side to rotate the bench so it corresponds with its proper placement, releasing our trigger when we're done. Now let's copy one last time. There you go, we've got a place to kick up our feet in this comfy museum room. Next time, we'll clean up the lingering error in projections on the floor beneath our benches. See you next time.